Okay, so we are recording this meeting. I think you all know that we do that pretty regularly. Do we have anybody new today? I think we had at least one person I saw here. Kevin Huffman, would you like to introduce yourself, please?
Sure. My name is Kevin Huffman. I'm a network administrator at the town of Oro Valley.
Great, welcome.
Thank you.
I think this is your first time with us. Anybody else this is their first time here? Okay, got lots to talk about today, so let's just jump into it. Give me a second here. Okay, so as always, first of all, I'd like to thank our sponsors, Care First Health Plan, Karen Ziegler Consulting Services, Valley Telecom Group, Khajiit, and Triad. So thank you all for your support. And let's see here. So just jumping right into the agenda today, we're glad to have Sandeep here this morning, our broadband manager. Sandeep, you want to say hello and share with us whatever you need to talk about?
Good morning, everyone. My name is Sandy Bomik, State Broadband Director at Arizona Commerce Authority. We closed our challenge process last week. So this week, Tuesday, until Tuesday, we have received around 260,000 challenges. Currently, State Broadband Office through and sorting those challenges to post it on the portal. So if there is any challenge which is open.
We lost you, Sandeep. Sandeep, we lost you. Okay, well, let's move on. Aaron, you've got some updates, and then hopefully Sandeep will connect with us again. So Aaron, want to introduce yourself and give us some quick updates, please?
I can do that, and I can tell you a few of the things that I'm sure Sandeep would have said as well, if it's helpful. I do apologize to the group today. I'm calling and I'm on my way to another meeting, so I'm not on like I normally am. Do apologize. And I tried to get my Tesla to connect via Zoom, but apparently it doesn't like registration Zoom meetings. So gotta contact Elon about that. So my name is Erin Lorandos. I am the Digital Equity Program Manager with the Arizona Commerce Authority. I work in the same office that Sandeep does. What he was probably saying as he cut out was just an update on the fact that the challenge process did wrap up this week. The last day to submit challenges via the portal was Tuesday night.
Webinar. I'll call you later. Bye-bye. Okay.
Oh, sorry about that. Was that for me?
Henry.
Oh,
I'm sorry about that.
No worries. And so in any case, the challenge process did end, and he was mentioning that there were over 260,000 challenges logged in the portal. So that's pretty amazing. Of course, that means that now we have 260,000 challenges to parse through and validate and all of that. So my colleagues in the office have been very busy at that, along with the entities that are helping us out with that process. There is 2 weeks yet till the end of the month where our friends in the ISPs and other permissible rebuttalers will be able to provide the feedback, closing and all of that sort of thing. So if you do have any questions about any of that and Sandeep doesn't join again, I would encourage you to email our office at broadband@azcommerce.com. That will get to all of our inboxes, and whoever is the correct person to answer your question will be in contact with you. Let's see here. One other thing on challenge process, the office hours are continuing through this month. So to support those rebuttals and any further communication that needs to happen as well. So all of that's available through our website. And I do apologize, I can't drop links today. I don't think that would be advisable while driving. On the DE front, not too much to report. We are still working on our application for the capacity grant that is due the 28th, and that's for the state to apply for the just over $16 million that was allocated to implement our digital equity plan, which is available on our website for your perusal. Let's see here. Steve wanted me to remind folks about our new newsletter. It did go out the very beginning of this month, so if you did not receive it and you would like to, please either email us at the broadband email, broadband@azcommerce.com, or you can email me directly and I can get you the information. My email address is erinl@azcommerce.com. In that newsletter, there was a link to a survey for folks who might be considering applying for sub-grants from us from that capacity money that we're applying for right now. So this would be for organizations and entities across the state that are doing digital equity work that aligns with the goals and objectives that we laid out in our plan. And I'd be happy to, provide any, additional information about that. If folks do have questions, feel free to reach out. The survey is definitely not required. We're just trying to get a lay of the land for folks right now who are considering applying for funding through us. So if there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer. Otherwise, I believe that those are our updates. I'm not sure if Kelly's on. I apologize. I can't see who's on the call. But if she is, she could probably let you know about some upcoming engagements that we are participating in. All of that information is available on the Connecting Arizona engagement page on our website as well.
Erin, can you remind people again? I'm sure we've talked about it many times, but can you remind people who will be able to apply for those capacity grants, sub-grantee, and be a sub-grantee, please?
Yeah, so we are still getting all of the final details on that figured out, but basically it's our nonprofits, our local government, state departments, basically folks who are already doing digital equity work. They'll recognize themselves in that list.
Can a corporate entity also apply?
Like a business, you mean, or?
Yes.
Yeah. So again, the exact details are still a little TBD because we are building out our actual application. At this point, the survey, you can self-identify as what group you might belong to. The final details will be released when we actually are able to release the actual application. The survey is more of an information gathering.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for Erin? Kelly, I don't think I saw you. Are you online? I don't believe so. Sandeep, are you back?
Hey, Steve. Yes. Sorry, there was a coverage gap while I was driving. Erin actually updated you all, so thank you so much, Erin. And happy to take any question regarding challenge process.
Any questions? Going once, going twice. Okay, thank you, Sandeep. Thank you, Erin. Appreciate it as always. Glad you guys could make it this morning. I just want to remind people that as we go through the program today, that as always, most of the stuff that you hear about links, projects, and so forth, I try to include in the newsletter. Either may already be in the newsletter this week, or I always go through the chat and the transcript and see if there's any things that need to be included in my newsletter. So you'll find that you should be able to find all the information about contact person and the link, if there's a link to a program or web page. I just want to remind you because it's kind of hard sometimes to follow up on that. So any other comments or questions from Sandeep or, okay, Nicole, are you online? Nicole is not here. So we got federal updates this morning and probably and lots of stuff to talk about. So first I want to introduce, we've got Spectrum issue, Spectrum auction, ACP, Universal Service Fund, RIP and replace, and who knows what else. So we're pleased to have Brenna Lesser, who's the Tech Policy Counsel with Common Sense Media, to join us. And I haven't seen if Judy Soltrip is online or not from Senator Mark Kelly's office. So with that, Brenna, I'm going to turn it over to you. Do you need to share? I'm going to stop sharing.
No, you're good. I don't have anything to share. Unfortunately, didn't have enough time to put anything formal together. But it's been a busy week on ACP overall at the federal level. As I mentioned when I first joined, it's never a dull day. It was an interesting time to get into the space, but essentially since Congress has now passed the FAA reauthorization, that's obviously no longer a vehicle for ACP as a lot of us were hoping. So at this point, there are like two pathways for ACP to get extended, which is either through Spectrum reauthorization, which Senator Cantwell has a bill, the Spectrum and National Security Act, that currently has ACP funding in at $7 billion. But it's been scheduled for a markup twice now, and it's been pulled twice. So not exactly sure the path that has. And then the other pathway that ACP extension has would be a standalone bill. There's now several different options of what this could entail. There's the plain ACP extension acts that are in both the House and Senate and have quite a few sponsors, but they have roadblocks to either getting to the floor in the House or general support from Republicans in the Senate. But those are also $7 billion for ACP. But as of the past week, even past few days, there's been some additional amendments or proposals for ACP that could either be standalone bills or could be attached to the Cantwell Spectrum bill. So the one first amendment proposal mirrors the same language that Senator Lujan had included in FAA reauthorization, or had attempted to include in FAA reauthorization. That provides, I think, $6 billion. It might be 7. Sorry that I'm blanking on that, but which is essentially a clean extension, but it does include some eligibility changes, lowering the eligibility benefit for those who are qualified for Lifeline, as well as some additional changes based on households that are eligible based on like the free and reduced lunch portion. But overall, this is language that we're like overall fine with. If a change has to be included. This language is also very similar to an amendment that Senator Wicker introduced a couple days ago as well. So that's kind of one avenue at the moment. And then the other avenues currently, which we're not currently sure how they'll kind of play out, but Senator Cruz has introduced several different versions of language that seek to lower the benefit from, I think it's like 25, 20, 15, 10, like different tiers of lowering the ACP benefit per month. The main one being $10. There's an argument among a lot of Republicans and some think tanks that say because a lot of ISPs had provided their low cost option at $10 a month prior to ACP, and because the government essentially set a price floor for broadband at $30 per month, they raised their prices to meet that. This doesn't account for like the improvements in service, like the additional speed that enrollees or subscribers got from it. And it doesn't really account for the different technologies, I guess, that led to the overall increase in broadband costs for everyone, which was largely driven by like DSL and things like that. But that aside, Cruz has several amendments that essentially intend to heavily strip back the monthly benefit, heavily reduce the eligibility of households that qualify for it, And then also include a lot of different language on general telecom policy, reinstating or like revoking the FCC net neutrality, removing the rule that they can look at income as a digital discrimination, different things like that. So there's a lot of different things that are essentially non-starters in the cruise amendments, but we're not sure at this moment if how popular they could be among Republicans, specifically in the House, and if he'll be able to get any of that language included there. So that's kind of the TLDR for ACP as of now, which I understand is probably a lot. So
Brenna, Mark Goldstein, hi, good update. I do understand that Senate Commerce today is hearing a proposal limited to rip and replace at $3 billion and ACP at $6 billion. That's one of the specific potential instruments, I imagine?
are you referring to the commerce markup hearing that was scheduled for today?
Yeah.
It was canceled.
Right.
That's so this is, yeah.
Okay, sorry, I missed that.
No, it was late last night. No, you're good. But yeah, so this is the second time that the Cantwell Spectrum National Security Act has been up for markup, and now it's been pulled for a second time. One, because Schumer has to ensure that it'll pass on the floor, even if it passes out of committee. Like, they want all their ducks in a row to make sure that it will go through. And then also Senator Cantwell, I guess, was nervous about the likelihood of the spectrum bill passing, as well as a different bill that was scheduled for markup today with the Kids Off Social Media Act. It's like a Schatz bill. So there's some different.
Brenna, may I ask a question about the cell phone usage being paid for under ACP? We literally had a person tell us yesterday that the ACP is paying for her cell phone bill, so she can either get cell phone or internet. The cell phone companies have found a loophole, a huge loophole, especially on tribal communities where they're able to get $75 per month. Has that been addressed in this bill by Senator Cruz at all, or anybody?
I'm not sure offhand. I can look into it. I know that Senator Cruz's bill restricts the use of Lifeline for broadband access because they're trying to get at the duplicity. But I'm not sure exactly about cell phones.
The cell phone companies are saying that we're selling you internet service, but if you get it and you're eligible for ACP, we'll also pay that will also include cell service. And that's preventing people from getting actual service, more dedicated service. They're getting it as part of their cell phone bill. That is a huge loophole that needs to be addressed.
Gotcha. I can look into that. And as
Rory, it was one or the other.
No, Alana,
Well, it was supposed to be one or the other.
No, I'm not arguing your point. I'm saying that they found the loophole. So I mean, I can tell you which companies are doing it because we've run into them now. And but yeah, yesterday we were flat out told by a person in I think it was Holbrook that she can't. I'm sorry, it was St. John's that was actually she gets her internet. She gets her cell phone bill because she has internet on her service. That's the way it's presented to her. I will guarantee, I'll tell you, Cellular One is doing that across multiple communities because we've run into them. So, but the point being is they're using ACP to pay that bill, and they're using the lure of keeping their of having it pay for their cell phone at the same time. It's basically, we'll bill you for cell, and we'll bill you for internet, but we're going to throw in the cell service for free kind of scenario.
Rory, how are they even doing that if there is no more ACP at this point?
No, I'm agreeing with you. That's what I'm saying up until now. So if we're going to fund the project moving further, that loophole has to be addressed.
Got it.
There should be zero bundling of internet and cell phones as part of the ACP purchase, ACP usage, or whatever future plan is. The cell phone companies found the loophole and they used it. So
just make sure I understand, the customer is inquiring for like home fixed wireless, whatever wireless through like a cell phone company, and they're saying we'll give you internet at your home, but also here's a free cell phone? And
No, most cell phone plans come with internet of some type, whether it's capped or unlimited, doesn't matter, but and so they're basically saying, we're selling you internet to your phone and we're including cell phone service. And that's discouraging people from using ACP for just internet service alone. They won't switch off because their phone bill is basically paid for. Is that clear enough, or am I saying?
Yeah,
correctly?
I can concur on that too. We run that into that all the time here on the reservation with the ACP program. They're either having the ACP with their cell service and they're wanting the internet, and we're like, well, you've got to decide, is it going to be for your cell phone, or are you going to participate in the program on your cell phone, or you can participate on your broadband service? So they have to choose, and the cell companies really push it on the tribal reservation because they get the $75.
But Rory, that's not what you're saying, right? Because
No, that's exactly what I'm saying. The cell phone companies are selling internet service and including the phone service. It's a limited internet service in many of the tribe locations, and I don't know all of them obviously, but the ones that we're dealing with, their service over their cell phone is very poor quality. 3-4 megabits per second when it works, but they are getting free telephone service and ACP is paying for it. And because of that, they won't switch over to a higher speed service that they had. That would eliminate the cell phone bill being paid for.
do you know how often that there are other plans available, like of a home internet? Or
I can tell you the worst case, and that's the Cibicue area, because there is no other internet in that area. We just got a contract with the state to bring high-speed internet into there. We know there's 1 gig that goes into the entire town which includes the phone service and internet for the whole town, because we did an audit on the fiber going into that area. So we know there's no more capacity. Bottom line is that is the way they pay for their cell phone bill in that town. The ACP through Cellular One pays their cell phone bill, and they won't switch off of that because of it. That's the loophole that ACP created.
Hey, Rory, this is Kelly. I see what.
Oh, hi, Kelly. How you doing?
How you doing? I see what you're saying, but I got a question. I mean, if cellular provided data is eligible as a fixed wireless service for ACP, how would you divorce cell phone service from the data service? If you're in 4G or 5G, either one. I mean, you can't. If you've got 5G or you've got 4G, you got cell phone, because cell is the carrier for the data. So I'm not quite sure how you would, as long as it is fixed wireless, as long as cellular provided data is classified as fixed wireless, I'm not sure how you can prevent cell phone usage being bundled with it.
No, I believe it's mostly it's mobile wireless, which is not a qualified broadband service, probably at a 2.5, 3G level that's being subsidized.
Exactly.
Who's still pushing 3G out there?
Well, that's all they got. They're not pushing it. That's just that's the performance level. They may have 4G equipment, but they don't have the backhaul to put out 4G.
That brings me back to my question. How do you divorce the data from the voice?
You cannot include mobile data in ACP. Has to be specific in the wording that mobile data bundled is not eligible for ACP. I mean, I don't think it's that difficult.
That's what I'm saying. As long as there's not that sort of an exception in the rule, I don't know how you can stop it.
Kelly, I just said you have to say that you cannot offer a bundle package under ACP for mobile data. That's all you got to do is phrase it. Why would that statement not be sufficient?
What I keep seeing is everybody defining cellular as fixed wireless. I mean, I've run into that a lot with these BEAD applications I've been reviewing. I look at it and I expect to see what you and I might consider to be fixed wireless, and I see 5G instead.
I think the fact that it uses a cell phone should preclude it. But again, you can just simply say that you cannot bundle the two services together. I think that would be pretty clear. You cannot, ACP cannot cover in the same bill. Now, if they want to submit two bills, that makes it more difficult. But again, it still goes back to I didn't realize that you're defining 5G, whether it's mobile or fixed. I would assume that it's easy on the hardware side because a fixed 5G service requires an indoor router. It doesn't assign to a cellular phone, to a cell phone. That's the best way I could lay it out. I'm sure that we could come up with legal language to cover that.
Okay. Any other comments? We'll actually maybe hear some more about this when we hear from Brian in just a little while, from Brian Daly, who's our presenter. He may have some things to share about that. So, Brenna, maybe you or others can give what's the latest with the USF and USF reform?
Brenna, I think he's asking you. I don't know if you
Oh,
heard anything.
I didn't know you were asking me. I haven't been tracking USF reform as much recently. There was a hearing a couple weeks ago talking about the future of broadband affordability, which they mentioned the USF working group. So that's still a possible avenue for some type of reform. Although, as a something that just reminded me, the Cruz amendment for ACP prohibits any USF reform, or it mandates that the FCC has to be the one to decide about USF reform. So it strips Congress of the authority to do that. So for some context, but that's all I know on my end.
Okay. Anybody have anything else before we move on? Okay, well, while we're talking about legislative kinds of things, John Kelly, you have any updates here in Arizona?
Oh, kind of. The legislature is hip hopping along from week to week. The Senate met yesterday, took up a number of different bills, and then decided to adjourn until June 4th. The House will be back next week and doing a variety of little things, but the big issue is the budget, and the big issue attached to the budget is agency continuations such as ACA. And so all of that it's either so deep behind the scenes that it's impossible to know what's going on, or it's just not happening. And I think I lean toward the latter of those two. It's just not moving very, very far or very fast. There's a lot of travel that happens for legislators right around the Memorial Day weekend, so that's causing some issues. But overall, what we're waiting for is the signs that there's a budget deal coming. So I think we'll start to see some new fiscal numbers from the April tax returns in the next few days, maybe next week, and that may give a better sense of what the revenue picture is. So that's all I've got on my side.
Okay, thanks, John. Any questions for John? So, John, are we still concerned about the future of ACA and the home of the broadband office, or is it really not a big concern at the moment?
Well, as for me, Steve, I'm concerned about the future of the country, and ACA is bound up with that. So, yes.
Okay. Okie doke. All right, let's move on. So let's get to our program presentation, and it sounds like it's actually very timely. So I want to introduce Brian Daly with AT&T, and Brian, if you just tell people who you are and the great things that you're doing, would be really awesome. Oh, there you are.
I'm here. Hi.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can you still need for me to share your presentation?
Yeah, if you would please. Sometimes Zoom.
Yeah, sure. Hold on. Just
get too
Hold
many
on just a
problems. So
second.
while you're doing that, I'll just give an introduction. Again, my name is Brian Daly. I'm an AT&T Fellow and Assistant Vice President for Wireless Technologies at AT&T. I'm also the chair of the GSM Association's North American Fraud Forum and Security Group. Also a member of the FCC TAC, Technological Advisory Council, and a number of other associated activities. So what I would like to talk today is about some of the activities going on in the industry about moving to the next G. And why don't we go ahead and proceed to the next slide? So some of the trends we're seeing, let's see, Steve, can you advance? There we go. Yeah. So some of the trends we're seeing is extremely explosive growth in usage of mobile networks. We're seeing a 26% compounded annual growth rate in mobility network traffic per subscriber, 32% in the fixed wireline network traffic over 10 years. We're seeing 3 times more devices in an average household that we expect by 2030. And we also expect a 4-time increase in the projected data over the network within the next 5 years. So the challenge for us is to keep up with this demand that we're seeing on the network. And if we move to the next slide, so as far as AT&T's perspective, we'll back up a few. I think we there we go. Oh, next one. So we have a 3-pronged approach to addressing that. Obviously, we have the 5G network. We are expanding our fiber build-outs, and that includes within the state of Arizona and Mesa, as you may be aware. And we also have a fixed wireless product called AT&T Internet Air, which uses the 5G network to provide internet access into homes. But we are also looking at other technology advances in order to meet those demands. We're looking at what's known as standalone 5G, which is the advanced 5G network that will provide us with full 5G capabilities. We're looking at moving more of the compute power to the edge so that we can manage the power needed to do all these transactions on the network in more real time. I'll come back to satellite connectivity in a minute, but we also
Brian,
are looking at.
I'm
Yes.
sorry, before you move on, can you just explain what the edge means for folks who may not know that?
Which, I'm sorry.
The edge, what does that mean, moving it to the edge?
Edge means moving from centralized data centers to moving the compute power within the network closer to the end users and more distributed, so that we don't have the latency and dependence on single data centers for supporting network data traffic. So moving them to the end lowers latency and also distributes the compute power across the network so that we can better manage the workloads from the users.
Thank you.
Answer the question.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but
please do. Yeah, please do. We're also looking at what's known as RedCap or reduced capabilities. And this is to provide IoT devices the ability to operate on the network in a reduced capability fashion. Many IoT devices don't need mobility functions, for example. They're fixed. Many IoT devices don't need the full capabilities of the mobility network. So the reduced capability that's defined in the standards allows those devices to use less capabilities, which ultimately means use less power, so that if they're battery operated, for example, you don't have to worry about the batteries degrading within a short period of time. You'll get longer device life in the field, and ultimately the end goal is to get 5 to 10 years of those devices. We're also providing network APIs and these are programming interfaces into the network that allows the development of services and applications on the network in a more expedited fashion than what we have today. I glossed over satellite connectivity, but a little bit deeper into that, you may have seen an announcement over the past day or so about AT&T and AST Satellite providing that will be have a commercial agreement to provide direct satellite to your handset service. And what this gives is the ability to provide coverage in areas where we don't have cell towers. And that includes, many of the rural areas of Arizona and other states, as well as, providing a backup capability in case the cellular network, for example, for some reason would go down. Let's see, go to the next slide, please.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was checking the chat.
Yeah. And we can go ahead and move to the next one, please. So where we are right now, as I mentioned, we've got 5G already deployed nationwide, but the industry is also moving to what's known as 5G Advanced. And what this is going to do is strengthen the foundation of what we've already built with 5G. And also, we want to proliferate 5G to virtually all devices and use cases. That includes things such as drones and satellite communications, as I just mentioned. We are looking at, supporting extended reality, the reduced capability, multicast, as well as other enhancements in the network, especially to support sustainability and green networks. As we add more power, power and capabilities to the network, that's going to be meaning more energy consumption. So there is a effort to try to understand what that is and how to reduce that in a sustainable fashion. Next slide, please. We also are looking at 6G, and 6G in the ITU sense is currently known as what's the International Mobile Telecommunications 2030, and they've developed a framework for what the next generation of technology looks like. There are a number of usage scenarios that they've defined, including immersive communication, massive communication, as well as hyper reliable and low latency communication. But also they're adding in 6G ubiquitous connectivity, and that again is from non-terrestrial networks, adding intelligence into the network, so artificial intelligence and communication, as well as what's known as integrated sensing and communication. So this is the ability to provide sensing functions, and a good example of that would be in the automotive industry, in either autonomous vehicles or smart vehicles, where you can sense other vehicles on the road and sense road conditions, and that would be performed using a 6G network. And again, sustainability, connecting the unconnected, ubiquitous intelligence, and of course, security and resilience are some of the overarching aspects of that. And again, there's a number of new capabilities that are being looked at for emerging services and applications and drivers for future technologies, as well as emerging technology trends and enablers, looking at technologies to enhance the radio interface and just enhance the network overall. Next slide, please. I won't go into this in detail, but I included in the slide deck just for information. These are some of the trends that we are looking at, including connecting the physical, digital, and human world. So the merging of that digital world with the human world, things like digital twins, where you have the digital world and your presence in the digital world merged with what's going on in your human existence. Immersive and extreme experiences, emerging services such as the metaverse, new and enabling technologies, including new and additional spectrum that we'll see. And again, there's a number of other usage scenarios and capabilities and other framework objectives that are being defined here. We want to see the standards for 6G by the end of this decade, with commercialization shortly after in the early 2030s. Next slide, please. So our biggest question is 6G going to be an evolution or a revolution? And we have really three things to look at. What is the top line growth services that'll be provided by 6G? What are the bottom line cost savings? And what are technology evolutions that are going to help support this? From the top line growth, these are the new services that will be incorporated into 6G, such as integrated communication and compute, extended reality, sensing as a service, and seamless connectivity. The bottom line cost savings, again, carbon neutral operations and network energy savings is one of the big areas being looked at, but also looking at cloud native and distributed computing, which again helps us lower our overall cost to run the network. And then overall, we've got the technology evolution that's going to help support all of this. Next slide, please. So again, we're looking at an evolution to the usage tomorrow, where we have our traditional antenna, radio, and traditional silicon baseband intensive services to more disruptive services such as cloud, artificial intelligence, and these edge intensive technologies. And the overall is to support the 6 areas that IMT 2030 is looking at. The traditional on the right side includes the immersive communication, massive communication, and hyper reliability, low latency. And the new areas being brought in are ubiquitous connectivity, integrated sensing and communication, and integrated artificial intelligence and communication. Next slide, please. So again, as I mentioned, there is the path to have 6G standards defined by 2030, both in the ITU as well as 3GPP, which is the global organization that's defining the standards for mobility. They have a number of releases that are being defined that'll have 6G studies and 6G standards developed in time for 2030. And then shortly after that, during the development cycles of usually a couple of years, we'll start seeing 6G actually be deployed. Next slide, please. One of the other technologies being worked on is Open RAN. And when we say Open RAN, this opens the protocols and interfaces between the various subcomponents in the radio access network. Today, there's really 3 components that we have. There's a radio unit, a centralized unit, which contains the brains of the function, and the distributed unit, which has all the signal processing functions. When we disaggregate the RAN, we want to implement these with vendor neutral hardware so that we can have plug and play between these various components of the radio access network. So example, you can buy a radio unit from vendor A, and that will be able to talk to a distributed unit from vendor B through an open interface defined between the radio and the distributed unit. So the whole goal of Open RAN is to extend the supply chain so that we can have more vendors for the various components of the RAN, and not have a lock-in where you have to have all the components of the radio access network from a single vendor. Next slide, please. And as I mentioned, as we move toward the next generation, we are going to be unlocking various technologies, including artificial intelligence, cloud connectivity, as well as the need for more spectrum. When we look at these are not developed on those 10-year horizons that I mentioned from the ITU. And we need to have the ability to create or leverage the foundational interface that we have in 5G so that we can integrate new components as they mature and are needed within the network, and also in order to support consumers. So we're hoping that we can get on this development cycle where we're not locked into a 10-year horizon for a new generation, but we have the ability to support new technology introductions into the network more as they become available, rather than wait for a new generation to be developed. Next slide, please. And I mentioned artificial intelligence is going to be prolific throughout the network, both in the mobile devices, in the radio access network, as well as in the core network, and in the operations and maintenance systems that will support these networks. We're going to see AI and ML integrated in all network domains and layers to do everything from support for the customer to control of the radios and core network technical aspects within it. And of course, security is a big area where AI will become, deeply ingrained into the security mechanisms that are being incorporated with the network. That's already starting today, and as we move towards 6G, we'll only get more advanced into that. Next slide. This goes more into the radio access network itself. And I won't go into a lot of the details on this, but as we can see, the application of AI and ML are going to apply for all aspects of the radio access network, the core network, as well as local computing. And we want to do this to provide for better transfer and data collection for the use cases. We want to have more interoperability and network visibility to ensure network performance, and also have an integrated model training and lifecycle management throughout the network. Next slide, please. And spectrum is also the key. At the World Radio Conference that will be held in 2027, that's where they'll define new spectrum opportunities for 6G. We have two areas of spectrum. As you get into the lower and mid bands, this is where your wide area coverage and ubiquitous coverage occurs. When you get up in the higher bands, in the upper gigahertz and into the sub-terahertz range, those really are short range, more enterprise focused use cases. They do have massive capacity as you move up to those ranges because you have more bandwidth available. But that's only for specialized use cases. As you move into lower frequency ranges, you do get the deep coverage and more applicability for wide area coverage. Next slide, please.
1 second here.
Sure.
Okay.
And networks are moving to the cloud. So traditionally, everything was data center centric, but now we're moving toward the cloud, including the radio access network. This provides, better compute power as we move to the cloud. We have to add more networking capability, more storage capacity will be available in the network, as well as accelerators to help us support some of the functions that we need. So as we look toward the open, distributed, and centralized units within the Open RAN architecture, we see these moving to an open cloud that'll contain the workloads that will support the functions in those specific functional elements. And of course, we have network management on top of that. So there's a general trend to move compute power to each node but also to move toward the cloud, where we have a high level of integration between the mobile system and public, private, or hybrid clouds. Next slide, please. And I also mentioned applications and APIs. Certainly, these are going to be able to provide more agility for providing service management and orchestration, as well as end-to-end enrichment across the network, whether it be at the transport layer, the core layer, the application layer, or the radios itself. This shows within the radio access network and the core network how we have a common network management layer across those elements, and the applications that ride on top of them can provide for optimization, automation, and monetization of the various elements within there. And of course, we've got applications that are developed on top of these networks through various APIs that are being developed. Next slide, please. And of course, security. Zero trust is the big area we're moving for. As we move towards more open architectures, cloud-based native architectures, obviously the trust in the network has to be really ingrained within the network. And taking a zero trust approach, making sure we have trust at every level within the network and between all network elements, whether they be cloud-based or otherwise, is an important concept that we're looking at as we move forward into the 5G as well as the 6G architectures. There are a number of pillars that we're looking at for zero trust, but the key factor is making sure that there's trust between each of the different network elements, and that we build security into the network so that we have that trust built in. So moving to the next slide, just I want to thank you. Hopefully this gives a good overview of where the networks are heading. There's a lot of activity going on in the industry right now, looking at the evolution of 5G as well as the evolution towards next G. And with that, I'll take any questions.
Okay.
One thing I'm confused about, Brian, is when they talk about 5G, originally they talked about having millimeter wave 5G, dense deployment of 5G.
Yeah.
Antennas and so on, and that never really seemed to occur. You seem to skip from the mid-band 5G, which service providers are deploying widely. And now you're talking about a 5G advanced and never, omitting this transition to millimeter wave 5G dense deployment. What's the thinking there? What happened?
Yeah, well, there has been some millimeter wave deployments, probably not as dense and as widespread as originally thought. But for example, the fixed wireless relies on millimeter wave technology in order to get the broader bandwidths that'll support the fixed wireless applications. So I think the thing is, it hasn't been deployed as quickly as originally thought, because it does require the deployment of new equipment. It does require the new siting for the antennas. So all of that takes a bit more time and energy, especially working with the local jurisdictions to make sure we can get the antennas deployed in the dense areas that we were hoping for.
Okay, so there's this constraint on the deployment of the antennas, which hasn't been resolved. So
Right.
Does that relate to 6G issues too then? How do they get over that problem in 6G?
Well, I think it will continue to be a problem as we move towards 6G. I think there's two things about 6G, especially moving into the sub-terahertz or terahertz range. Those will primarily be indoor, enterprise solutions where you deploy those sites in an enterprise. So I think that will take care of itself from that aspect. But when you look at, millimeter wave continued deployments, I mean, that'll continue the evolution from 5G and run into the same issues and challenges that we have with 5G.
Okay, so you still need to resolve those types of challenges.
Correct.
In 6G, and
Correct.
are they kind of giving up on the millimeter wave for 5G or not?
No, not at all. It's just the deployments have been a bit slower than originally thought.
Okay,
But there's no giving up on those frequency bands.
okay. One of the questions I have also is when you talk about 6G directions, there's all kinds of ideas there.
Yeah.
Do they have economic studies that back up the needs for all these new types of services? I mean, it seems like what you do in these standards bodies is you imagine all the kinds of things that could be of interest and develop standards for deploying them. But do you have the economic studies that back up the needs for these services within the various sectors of the economy? And how does that work? How does that relate to the standards development?
Yeah, I mean, the bottom line is no. There aren't economic studies. The technologists that develop these standards really focus on technology and what will be available from a technology evolution. There is some input from operators on what they see as the future needs of their networks and their customers. But there haven't been detailed economic studies on each of these to see if it makes sense from an economic point of view. I mean, some of them make sense, like when you look at the sustainability in Green G, there is an economic factor in there as you're lowering the cost of operation within the network. But overall, there haven't been studies that show each of those services will provide an economic benefit.
Right. Okay. So it's a very complex process to think through all these things, but
and what makes it even more difficult is we're talking a decade out, and trying to predict what the economic situation and what the customer demands are going to be a decade out. It's a bit of a crystal ball activity. So our marketing's really focused on maybe 3 to 5 year out, and they have a good understanding of that. But once you get past that into 10 plus years, it really becomes a difficult endeavor to try to figure out, what exactly the demands are going to be by customers. We have some traffic predictions and so forth where we know how we need to engineer the network, but it's not as clear what the customer demands will be.
Do they really understand? Another area I'm interested in, you talk about the energy consumption.
Mm-hmm.
Do they really understand? I mean, you're providing all these new services. Have they looked at the energy consumption of all these new services versus the operational efficiencies that you're trying to obtain in the network through reducing energy consumption in the network? Have they quantified all of that in some way, or is that still?
That's still ongoing. That needs to be done. In fact, between the vendors and the operators, looking at the network and power consumptions within the network, we're looking at that right now, trying to get a handle on what we're consuming today versus where we need to be in the future, targeting, zero carbon emissions or lowering the energy consumption within the network as much as we can.
Right. It's really because like when you talk about the whole area of artificial intelligence, there's a lot of energy consumption related to implementing that when you talk
Right.
about it from the consumer level, and then
Yeah.
I don't know, within the network level, I'm wondering if you're if you've quantified the efficiency gains from implementing those things. Like there's a lot of.
It's still an ongoing process. We haven't.
Right. Okay. Well, thank you for I mean, it's a very broad landscape of things you're talking about, but
Yeah.
seems like there's, just those kinds of issues concern me in terms of how it actually rolls out,
Sure.
what all the issues are associated with all these things.
Yeah,
Thank
no,
you.
appreciate your input and insights into that as well.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. So Brian, of course, you mentioned security. Can you talk a little more, since you're the guy in terms of security issues? Where are we with security today and tomorrow? I mean, I know it's a moving target, but can you talk a little more about where we are with security these days?
Yeah. I mean, as you're well aware of what's going on in the global political environment, obviously networks that are deemed critical infrastructure are under constant attack by threat actors, outside the U.S. And that has forced operators of critical infrastructure to make sure we have security controls in place for intrusion detection and mitigation of those threats. And we, as well as other operators and other critical infrastructure providers outside the telecom industry, have put a number of security mechanisms in place in order to protect the networks from the outside, as well as making sure we protect the networks from the inside as well. Again, moving toward this zero trust philosophy, trust no one, verify everything, is really the key, whether it be external or internal within the networks. So that's the direction we and other operators are heading. And again, the threat landscape has increased given the global geopolitical situations. So we're implementing the appropriate security mechanisms and mitigations accordingly. That answer your question, Steve?
Yeah, Brian, except for one thing, and we've discussed this before, and I think I've probably talked with you about this also. That is, we're connecting all these people who have no experience with a computer, no experience with internet, and now we're giving them internet, we're giving them devices, and I'm not sure we're doing much. And we've talked about and been a little delinquent in getting it together of creating a cybersecurity alliance, but has your industry talked at all about all these new people who are now getting connected and the threats and the risks besides the international threats that are out there? But those seems to me another issue.
Yeah, no, that is, obviously a concern. You've got both ends of the network. You've got the external interfaces in, and you've got the customer interface coming into the network with all the data connections that you have. And again, we have extended our security mechanisms to that, to the data network, whatever entry points into that network. Obviously, you mentioned a good point that there is an education that's needed for the consumers to understand how they can protect their devices, because whether it be social media or just email, there's a lot of phishing attempts. There's a lot of malware attempts to introduce malware onto devices and networks through those paths. And getting consumers to understand that, the email that looks like it's from AT&T or Xfinity or whomever, verify it's really from AT&T or Xfinity or wherever before you open any links on it, because there are bad actors out there that are using those paths to try to introduce either introduce malware into the networks or to, obtain subscriber information, personal information that they can use then against you.
Thank you. Okay, we have just a few minutes left, so I want to do a couple of quick things. First of all, Anthony, do you have anything with the state library that you want to give a quick update?
Hey there, Steve. No major updates for me today. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And so at the beginning of the meeting, I mentioned we're glad to see Jennifer Toothaker with the city of Tucson. And Jennifer, can you take just a couple minutes to give us an update? You guys got a lot of stuff happening. Can you take a couple minutes to give us a quick update, please?
Sure. We do have a lot going on, but there's not a lot to update on. What I can share is that we are, actively working with Pima County and tracking the bead. In terms of our own preparations for the ISPs, one of the things we're looking at is streamlining our procedures and process for those companies. We have a number that are interested in coming into City of Tucson. Some of that was sparked with the RFI that we issued last summer that asked, if ISPs came in and were to put in an entire network, fiber to every home, which we actually called fiber to every premise, what would they propose doing? And that got a lot of ISPs' attention. We've since learned that we really can't give exclusive rights to any company unless we have the money that we're funding, and we don't have $300 to $400 million to invest in a full network. So we're not going that route, but we are looking at options and ways to try to incentivize or to require fiber to the premise for any company coming in and building out fiber in our right of way. We're in conversation right now with some companies to come on. There's a little bit of money that City IT has that they can use to help bring someone on to help us, kind of look through everything that we've pulled together and try to help us solidify this sort of approach and program that we're trying to put into place. So we're hopeful by early July, we'll have had someone with experience and knowledge greater than ours in the industry that can kind of look at this. Additionally, provide some hours to help support our staff. We've identified a few different positions in our kind of workflows that will be working on these types of projects as they come in. And we're trying to also support coordination across projects. So where if it's possible to do a dig once type of approach, we'd really like to do that and incentivize that. I think what we've heard from other cities is that sounds great in theory. It's really tough to do in practice. I think even maybe some folks that are on this meeting have said that to us too. So, but the coordination would not just be for dig once, it actually would be just looking at tracking where folks are going and really trying to hold folks to a fiber to every premise in City of Tucson approach. I hope this all makes sense. I feel like I was talking very fast, but that is the best update I can give you right now as to where we're at. Any questions?
Thank you, Jennifer. Any quick questions for Jennifer?
Yeah, Jennifer, what is your position with the City of Tucson, by the way? What is your position there? Because we had the CIO from the City of Tucson here speak once.
Yes.
About the fiber to the premise concept there. What is your position there? How do you relate to him? Or
yes, I am working with him. He is our lead, if you will. I work out of our city manager's office in Tucson. I have 24 years experience with City of Tucson and in different arms of the organization, most recently in transportation, where I was for 12 years, and it was the planning team administrator. So I oversaw our transportation planning and mobility systems and services.
So the idea, you want to develop fiber to the premise to every location, and the option, are you considering then developing a municipally owned network that would be leased to ISPs? Is that something you're still considering, or you're not?
No, I think the RFI helped get us to a point of realizing that we don't want to be in that game. We are supportive of other companies coming in. We are trying to think about how there might be ways to reduce, every company coming in and ripping open the roads and putting in their infrastructure. We're trying to think about smart strategic ways to be able to accommodate more companies coming in, building out. We want to support the competition that brings.
But Pima did get a big middle mile grant. Michelle Simon presented on that in an NTIA webinar that Steve had announced. There'll be a replay of that available, Steve, probably in the next few days, and you push the link out. But Michelle Simon presented the Pima open access network that circles the Tucson area, doesn't cross through it, I don't believe, but it does give good fiber capability around the perimeter.
Yeah, well, it just seems to me, Mark, that when you talk about the middle mile network being an open access network, that it makes sense to think about the last mile municipal fiber to the premise network being an open.
It makes sense, but they funded it under a middle mile specific program, and so that's what they got.
Right. And the whole question of these municipal networks, I don't think they're being considered in the context of the whole infrastructure that's needed, like to address the climate crisis, because the electric power utilities need to build out their distribution networks to handle electric vehicles and enhanced expanded electrification in the municipalities. So
Henry, we're gonna do. I've actually started talking to some folks about doing a panel sometime in the next few weeks on municipal networks, talking about the different models, pros and cons, relationship to ISPs. I mean, there's a whole range of issues when you talk about municipal networks. And so we're going to be putting together a good group of folks to
that'll be interesting. I hope we can get the city of Tucson involved in that, because I'd like to understand their thinking about why they're against this whole
money, Henry. It's a big capital investment.
Huge.
Is there an extra $50 or $100 million assignable from a Tucson city budget? Frankly, it was considered during an active committee working period that Steve and I participated in with the city of Tucson that went on from about maybe 10 to 15 months ago. There was about a 5-month planning and study, and certainly municipal networks were discussed, but both as a appropriate and staffable activity for city to manage and as a capital investment cost, it was declined, but it was duly considered.
Yeah, well, I kind of think this whole thing has to do with the federal government strategy on addressing the climate crisis and working jointly with the electric utilities and the telecommunication companies in terms of the overall picture here. I don't think it's being properly framed by the federal government, in my opinion.
Henry, we've worked with cities that have municipal government, or municipal internet, and what happens is you have a technology refresh that has to happen in a few years. Even fiber has a refresh in the sense that to be upgraded, you still have to go out and tap touch every device. And that's where the cities start to run into a problem if it's not listed as a profitable endeavor. The one I would suggest you look up would be Utopia up in Utah. And that went $250 million deep before they started to break even and started to recover the CapEx. I'll have to double check their financials. I don't know if they've actually even recovered the CapEx at this point. Obviously, the side benefits are completely different, but that's one example. So it is a huge endeavor for a municipality to get involved. And then you've got the other problem of you're competing with private industry. And there's a lot of companies that aren't going to be very happy about that. City of Mesa probably did one of the better ones in where they had open access and brought in 4 vendors. Jennifer, did you guys talk to City of Mesa at all during this process? So are you guys comfortable with with what they did?
We are. We've looked at what Mesa, Chandler, Gilbert, Phoenix, Pima County, and then of course our own practices. We've kind of looked at all of those to try to compare and see who's doing what and how. And we've a couple of things that we are considering. One, City of Phoenix is looking to establish a new type of license called fiber to the home. This would, right now, the way municipalities typically allow ISPs in to build in the right of way is through a license type that's really connected to telecommunications license type and set by the state law. And one of the realizations is this truly isn't telecommunications, which has more of an interstate kind of function. It's often more regional. What is really happening right now is that people are getting internet for their personal use, home or business, and that's local service. And Phoenix sees that they're looking for something that's more like a local internet broadband network services license type. They're holding off until legislative session ends before they move forward, because the state has gotten very excited about these types of local decisions and have also worked to preempt them. So we're looking at what they're establishing as a possible license type for us. We do foresee going through a code change and a fee change public process in upcoming months, not too far away. We too may wait until the legislative session is over so that we can, work to do our own thing and then deal with the chips as they fall with the next legislative session. I'll stop talking. I'm sure that's more than you wanted to hear.
I know we're running out of time. So I just want to say one more thing about that we are going to do this program, and Roy, I'm going to be talking to you about participating in that. I certainly want to have the ISP perspective on municipal networks, municipal government perspectives, other technology providers. So we need to really look at the whole range of issues that come into play with that. So we're not going to have any more discussion about that today because we're way past time. I want to just do one quick thing. Mark, I don't know if you want to say anything. Brenna didn't talk about this today, and Elena dropped off, and she put it in the chat, and I also included in my newsletter about the USF, the FCC decisions regarding the Universal Service Fund. Are you somewhat familiar with that?
I don't have informed comments to make on that today. Sorry.
Okay. So the only thing
I did put a few interesting new things in the chat though today.
Yeah,
you'll pick up.
And I included that in my newsletter also. That if I understood correctly, that the FCC has decided 2 things. One is that they would not include, ISPs, broadband providers, as a source of funds for the USF, and that they would preclude local governments or state governments from doing the same. So, Rory, did you happen to see that? And if not, we'll share more information about that. But I believe that that's what what it said. You're on mute.
Sorry, I'm gonna go with Mark. I don't have a lot to say, and I'm actually got a bunch of emails that I haven't finished going through from our lobbying organization and so forth, so.
Well, Elaine included in the chat, and I also included in my newsletter that I sent out a day or two ago. And I'll include it again when I send out the next update. Any other,
Right,
anything
the
else?
Shelby response I'm gonna yet read. I haven't, that Elena posted.
Okay, I haven't seen their response yet. So anything else? Mitch Gorson, hopefully at the next meeting, good to see you. And hopefully the next meeting, we can hear more from you. Oh, is he gone? Oh, he's still there. Okay, well, if anybody has anything else, if not, I'm going to stop recording. If anybody wants to stay online,